The streets of London in the early 1950s carried a certain weight, quiet, worn, and watchful. The city had not yet shed the marks of war, and life moved at a slower, more cautious pace. Bombed-out buildings still stood in some neighborhoods, while others carried on with a sense of routine shaped by ration books, factory shifts, and long-standing tradition. It was into this atmosphere that Robert Frank stepped with his camera, drawn not to the monuments or polished views of London, but to the lives that unfolded in its fog-covered corners. Robert Frank, 1924 to 2019, who would later gain international recognition for his groundbreaking 1958 photobook, The Americans, had already begun honing the distinct visual language that would define his work. Between 1949 and 1953, he regularly returned to Europe from his adopted home in New York, producing images across France, Switzerland, Spain, and the United Kingdom. These early projects laid the foundation for the sharp, unflinching realism and emotional depth that would later characterize his most famous work. Among these European studies, Frank's photographs of London taken primarily in 1951 and early 1952 stand out for their quiet, intensity, and remarkable insight. He immersed himself in the daily life of the city, capturing moments that most would overlook. His lens followed the sharply dressed financiers through the financial district, documenting the uniformity and ritual of British business culture with a mixture of curiosity and subtle critique. Dressed in top hats and long coats, these men moved through the fog-like figures from another era, untouched by the grime and struggle surrounding them. But Frank didn't stop at the world of polished suits and city bankers. He turned his camera toward coal workers unloading deliveries, children playing in alleyways, and passers-by pausing on park benches. In an interview years later, Frank simply said, "I like the light. I like the fog." This understated reflection reveals a great deal about his approach. He was not chasing grand narratives or monumental events. Instead, he embraced atmosphere and detailed the texture of the city itself. After relocating to Nova Scotia, Canada, Frank split his time between a former fisherman's shack along the rugged coast and his loft on Bleecker Street in New York City. Following the death of his wife, Andrea, he became increasingly private, rarely giving interviews or making public appearances. He remained dedicated to his art, producing both films and still photographs, and took part in organizing retrospectives of his work. Since 1984, his photography had been represented by the Pace McGill Gallery in New York. In 1994, the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C. presented Moving Out, the most comprehensive retrospective of his career. Frank passed away on September 9, 2019, at his home in Nova Scotia. Please subscribe this channel.